In the previous episode 3 of Skanderbeg, we covered how Sultan Mehmed II finally managed to capture Constantinople on May 29th, 1453. In the wake of the horrific news that the Eastern Roman Empire had been defeated, Venetian senators were unconcerned that the Sultan would violate their peace treaty, giving Skanderbeg only blank promises of help, while secretly, behind his back, desired nothing more than for his defeat. Before we continue, I would like to take this time to give a big shout out to all you guys that have generously donated to the channel. You are all truly sons and daughters of the Eagle. Thanks again. Contrary to the carefree attitude of the Venetians, Pope Nicholas V of Rome and the Republic of Ragusa encouraged a papal intervention, providing Skanderbeg with substantial financial support of around 4,000 ducats. In addition to the papal support, Ragusan bishop began to expand their sphere of influence by mediating between the state of Arber, the Hungarians and the Serbs to organize a Christian crusade against the Ottoman Empire. In a bold attempt to minimize the Christian coalition forces, Sultan Mehmed II personally led the campaign to invade Serbia and then advance to Hungary. In a response to Ottoman aggression, Hunyadi, at the head of the Hungarian army, crossed the Danube and defeated the army in Serbia, capturing their famous commander Firuz Bey Pasha. The fact that the Ottoman army had suffered a huge defeat in its campaign against the Christian coalition in Serbia did not mean that the Ottomans were defeated. Far from it. The newly created state of Arberia, the Kingdom of Hungary, and the Italian kingdoms were all aware of the increasing danger the Ottoman constantly posed. One can only imagine the difficulties Skanderbeg must have gone through, given the breakup of the Arbër League and the wavering attitude of many Arbër nobles. Nevertheless, Skanderbeg, who never once wavered from his mission, continued to take political precautions to ensure that internal divisions would not escalate. To ensure this, he first had to find a way to unify his countrymen by offering peace treaty with one of the most powerful Arbër families, the Dugagini. Given the nature of Arber's strong Christian faith of that time, who else could guarantee a peace treaty better than the Pope himself? So for this reason, Skanderbeg implored the Pope to reconcile with the Dugagini family on his behalf. By August of that year, Pope Nicholas came to Skanderbeg's aid and ordered the bishops of northern Catholic churches, along with Dugagini priests, to curse the Dugagini family if they did not stop cooperating with the Sultan, to fight side by side with Skanderbeg against the Ottomans. After the Pope's energetic intervention, the two families swore the Bessa oath and finally made peace in early autumn of 1454. As a gesture of their loyalty, the Dugagini family sent their ambassador Brexanus to Naples and asked King Alfonso to present their repentance to the Pope. In addition to their remorse, the Dugagini requested Alfonso to approve and accept them as their vassals, thus reviving the Arbër League of Lezhë under the umbrella of the Kingdom of Naples. Thrilled by the outcome, King Alfonso of Naples sent a message to Skanderbeg on December 9th of 1454, promising him 1,000 infantry units as well as 200 cavalry units will be sent to support him. By May of 1455, Skanderbeg had received 1,500 infantry units and 500 cavalrymen from King Alfonso and Pope Nicola that were equipped with food, weapons, and Venetian bombers. The increased reinforcements allowed Skanderbeg and the League War Council to strategize a massive undertaking to liberate occupied territories in southern provinces of Arbër. Now, from a military standpoint, the fortress of Berat and that of Svetigrad Castle were of primary importance for both the League and Skanderbeg. The strategic city of Berat would pave the way for the liberation of the southern Arbër territories, in particular the fortress of Gjirokastër and the center of the Arvanit Sanjak. As for the castle of Svetigrad, this strategic point would secure the eastern borders and halter the Ottoman army from entering further into Arbër territories. When the Arbër League army, which consisted of 12 to 15,000 men, arrived at the outskirts of the city of Berat in mid-July 1455, they slowly surrounded all four corners of the city. Within hours after the battle commenced, the Venetian bombers began to fire into the city. Later managed to knock down a big part of the castle defensive walls. When the Turkish garrison commander saw that parts of the wall had fallen, he quickly pleaded for a ceasefire and promised to surrender the castle after 10 days. Skanderbeg, who wanted to use the momentum and capture the castle then and there, was reluctant to agree at first, but was later convinced to stand down. When news had reached the Sultan that Berat was being captured, Mehmed quickly ordered his commander Ishak Bey Evornuzi to stop his Asian campaign and redirect his army to aid Berat. With just a few days to spare, Ishak quickly ordered their retreat and headed towards Arbër. Knowing that the Arbër scouts might pick up on their advancements, Ishak Bey chose a different route and rode off with 30,000 cavalries in the direction of Berat. By the end of the 10th day, as the Turkish garrison was informed that Ishak Bey's reinforcements were approaching, they began to play drums and other tools to confuse the Arbër forces. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Ishak Bey and his forces launched a surprise attack and rushed Muzak Thopia's main forces that was stationed well outside the castle. Unprepared, Muzak Thopia quickly regrouped his 5,000 men into a defensive formation, began to fight wave after wave of oncoming cavalry units. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the castle, Gjergj and Skanderbeg, who were unaware of the sudden attack, saw as the dust began to thicken from afar. As soon as Skanderbeg gave the order to sound the battle horns to regroup, they quickly rushed to help Muzaka. Upon reaching Muzaka's unit, Aryaniti and Skanderbeg witnessed as his troops were slowly being massacred by the enormous cavalry unit. In a daring attempt to save Muzaka, Aryaniti and Skanderbeg's forces furiously fought against enemies from all sides. Unable to save Muzaka and his men, Skanderbeg suddenly realized that he had been surrounded and had no way out. Hours later, as Skanderbeg's men continued to fight ruthlessly and bravely into the night, they somehow managed to find an opening through the thick wall of men and then managed to escape to safety. Upon returning from the bloody battle and reaching the safety of Kruja's walls, Skanderbeg received the unfortunate news that his most trusted advisor and commander, Moise Golemi, had betrayed him and joined the Sultan's forces. Although it is uncertain as to why Moisi defected, legends tells us that Moisi did so because he had been stripped of his original estate in Dibra and sided with the Sultan to reclaim it. As if the news of Moisi's treachery wasn't bad enough, more unfortunate news would put Skanderbeg in a tenuous position. In the aftermath of the crushing defeat at Berat, Arbër League members had become so disappointed in Skanderbeg's negligence in letting Ishak Bey outwit him, convinced many of them to leave the League. The unfortunate demise of the League, but also Moisi's betrayal, did not overthrow Skanderbeg's power, nor did they weaken the unification of the Arbër state. In the month that followed, Skanderbeg would receive consideration from an unexpected admirer. The Spanish Cardinal Alfonso de Borja, who had followed Skanderbeg's progress and idolized his success against the Ottomans, encouraged the Arbër morale to a new height. Shortly after, the enthusiastic Alfonso de Borja became the new Pope of Rome on 8th of April, 1455, as Pope Calixtus III. He gave the traditional blessing to the city and the world, declaring that the papacy was going to organize a crusade in the Balkans to expel the Ottomans. However, what the new pope did not expect was a strong anti-papal resistance that criticized him for wanting to keep the wealth for himself and not finance the crusade. To add more insult to injury, the Republic of Venice withdrew its aid to Pope Calixtus and resumed its provocation against Skanderbeg's power. As for King Alfonso of Naples, who had lost all hope after the demise of the Arbër League, also refused to aid the Pope. The only states that heard Pope's call and joined the crusade were the Arbër state, the Kingdom of Bosnia, and Hungary. Meanwhile, as Pope Calixtus' legion were busy convincing European courts to unify, Sultan Mehmed II decided to go to work. Before the crusade was set in motion, Mehmed laid down a plan to weaken the Arbër forces by letting the Arbërs to fight each other. Shortly after all preparations were made, the Ottoman army set off from Skopje in late February 1456. As the Ottoman army approached the Arbër borders, Skanderbeg was informed that Moise Golemi himself was leading the Ottoman army. On the morning of March the 18th, 1456, the two armies would meet in the plains of Oranik, outside the city of Dibra. Moisi had arranged his army of 15,000 soldiers in two lines and led them from the rear with his trusted Arbër reserves from Dibra. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, Skanderbeg had divided 10,000 of his soldiers into three groups and placed himself in the cavalry unit in the middle. Moments before the battle commenced, Skanderbeg ordered his men not to take one single prisoner, but to kill every soldier in their path. As soon as the battle initiated, Moisi's first line quickly became outmaneuvered by the sheer force of Skanderbeg's cavalry attack. Simultaneously, as the Arbër flanks gradually surrounded the Turks from each side, leaving thousands of dead behind them, eventually reaching Moisi's rear section. Even though Moisi fought bravely, he could not stand firm against the unforgiving Arbër fury. In a daring attempt, Skanderbeg almost caught up to Moisi, but somehow Moisi managed to escape, leaving the rest of his army to suffer under Skanderbeg's wrath. Despite Moisi's defeat, he returned a month later in April of 1456, and begged Skanderbeg for his forgiveness. Merciful as Skanderbeg was, he pardoned Moisi and reinstated him to his former position. Legends say that after Moisi was pardoned, he devoted the rest of his life to the Arbër struggle, never opposing Skanderbeg again. In the following month of May, the Venetian, who did not hold back their old policy of undermining Skanderbeg's power, appointed Gjergj Kastrioti, one of the most influential Arbër nobles and Skanderbeg's father-in-law, the position of Venetian captain in Arberia. This additional setback not only weakened Skanderbeg's forces, but caused a great rift between the two states after the Venetian declared war on Skanderbeg. As tension between them grew stronger, the Venetian invaded and took over Danja Castle on November 4th, 1456, dividing them even further. However, shortly after Danja was captured, Lek Dugagini successfully retook the castle from the Venetians. Although Lek Dugagini's invasion was not ordered by Skanderbeg, the Venetians started to spread rumors accusing Skanderbeg of being an enemy to the Republic. While the sad news that Skanderbeg's father-in-law had joined the Venetians spread throughout Arberia, it was quickly overshadowed by the joyful news that Skanderbeg had become a father. This joyful news did not sit well with Skanderbeg's nephew, Hamza Kastrioti. By law, Hamza was expected to succeed after Skanderbeg's death. However, when Skanderbeg's son, Gjergj Kastrioti II, was born in 1456, Hamza was deposed from the throne. In retaliation, Hamza gathered his forces and openly defected and sided with the Sultan in hopes to reclaim his throne as head of the family. Immediately after Hamza had joined Sultan's army, Hamza begged the Sultan to grant him a powerful army with which he would crush Skanderbeg once and for all. Shortly after Skanderbeg was informed of the massive invasion, the war council was summoned. Meanwhile, at Sultan's court in Istanbul, Sultan Mehmed appointed the ruthless and successful commander Ishak Bey Evornuzi, who had defeated Skanderbeg at the Battle of Berat, to lead the army together with Hamza Kastrioti. Hamza, who possessed invaluable knowledge of Arberian territory, was given the task to assist Evornuzi. By the spring of 1457, the Sultan had gathered a staggering number of around 60,000 to 80,000 soldiers. When the news reached Skanderbeg, he urgently sent letters to Pope Calixtus III, asking the Pope to aid him in the upcoming battle. In his response, the Pope promised a fortified ship with provisions. However, the ship never reached the Arbër shores. Once again, Skanderbeg stood alone against an army that outnumbered him 10 to 1. Realizing that Hamza had an advantage of their tactics, Skanderbeg and his generals began to map out a masterful strategy. Due to the enormity of the Ottoman army, Ishak Bey sends small cavalry divisions in advance to establish control before the next brigade could arrive. When the first unit approached the Dibra borders on 31st of July, 1457, the entire Arbër army managed to stop them from advancing. But when the main Ottoman forces arrived, along with Ishak Bey and Hamza, the Arbër forces employed similar tactics that Hamza was familiar with. As the battle commenced on the 3rd of August, Skanderbeg's army fought bravely, But as the Turks advanced, the Arbër army gave the impression that they were losing. Amid the battle, the Arbër army gradually began to retreat, dispersing and scattering chaotically in all directions. When Hamza saw Skanderbeg fleeing, he began to chase his uncle deep into the forest. After a long pursuit, as Hamza lost all traces of Skanderbeg and his troops, he began to believe that his uncle had been defeated. However, what both Ishak and Hamza was unaware of was that Skanderbeg had already prepared for this exact outcome weeks in advance. Prior to the battle, Skanderbeg had made sure that local population had the necessary provisions to supply the army with food and shelter without being detected by the enemy. As a precaution, Skanderbeg had given the army strict orders not to engage in any combat until further notice. After weeks of searching throughout the provinces of Mat and Dibra, while committing their usual looting, interrogating peasants, burning down houses along the way, Ishak and Hamza found no traces of Skanderbeg anywhere. Ishak Bey, who wasn't really that convinced that Skanderbeg had been defeated, went back to Kruja, set up camp on Mount Tumenisht in hopes to lure Skanderbeg out from hiding. Well hidden in one of his prepared caves, Skanderbeg ordered his most trusted men to conjure up lies that Skanderbeg had betrayed all the leaders and was trying to save his own head by seeking protection from the Venetians. As the lies began to spread, Ishak Bey and Hamza picked up on the rumors. Suspicious that this was a trap, Ishak and Hamza cautiously continued searching for Skanderbeg. Patiently, Skanderbeg waited until the Ottomans were no longer looking for him, and after having searched for 4 months, they finally became convinced that Skanderbeg had left the state. By mid-September, Ishak Bey ordered his entire army to prepare for a full withdrawal. Immediately after Skanderbeg became informed that the search had ended, he gave the order to light the war beacons. A few days later, on September 24th, 1457, the entire Arbër army regrouped at Mount Tumenisht. On the following morning, as the Ottoman army prepared carelessly in the blistering sun, loud trumpets, drums and other deafening instruments began to echo from the mountains. At first, the Ottoman soldiers could not make out what the fuss was about. But when they saw a huge cavalry unit stampeding frantically down the hill, and then an infantry unit appear to the right, and lastly a second cavalry unit approaching from the rear, the Ottoman camp was completely surrounded within minutes. As the first cavalry unit charged down the hill and chopped at the unprepared soldiers, Ishak Bey quickly ordered to form a defensive formation. Overwhelmed by the heavy onslaught from the infantry arquebusiers that were stationed well outside the camp, the Ottoman camp became infested by panic. Slowly and methodically, as the camp was losing both men and ground, Skanderbeg's cavalry unit pushed further into the camp. Meanwhile, at the other side of the camp, as Hamza's forces were being butchered by the second cavalry unit, Hamza then ordered to signal Ishak Bey to send reinforcement. Unable to help Hamza, Ishak Bey's troops were forced to retreat further into the heart of the camp. As the stockpile of dead Ottoman soldiers grew, uncontrolled chaos started to spread throughout the Ottoman camp. Disoriented and terrified, Ottoman soldiers started to flee in panic. When Ishak Bey realized that he had lost the battle, he somehow managed to escape to safety, leaving hundreds of his soldiers to die and dozens of his officers to be captured. Among many of the captives was also Hamza. Shortly after the battle had ended, Skanderbeg handed over his nephew Hamza, along with the rest of the captives, to King Alfonso of Naples as security. The impressive victory at Uibarda, also known as Albulena, is considered to be one of the most brilliant and outstanding victories Skanderbeg had achieved. Compared to the great victory at Kruja in 1450, where Skanderbeg managed to prevent the Ottomans from taking Kruja for 5 months, all while dealing with treacherous Arbër nobles. The Battle of Albulena, however, was a totally different victory in itself. The mere fact that Skanderbeg used a brilliant strategy by exhausting and outwitting the entire army for 4 nerve-wracking months, with an outstanding support of the local population, is masterful in itself. But to wait until the most opportune moment and then attack an enemy 10 times his size in an open field and with minimal damage to his forces has seldom been seen in military engagements. 3 months after the Battle of Albulena on 23rd of December 1457, Pope Calixtus III appointed Gjergj Kastrioti Skanderbeg as Captain General of the Holy See. We highly appreciate that you watched this episode of Skanderbeg. To ensure that our videos reaches more viewers, smash that like button, share the video and all that good stuff. Until next time, Tung.